We'd like to thank Secretary Kluttz, the Secretary of Cultural Resources for North Carolina, being here today. And as a fellow mayor, it's an honor to have her here, and knowing her commitment to the small towns and the cities across North Carolina. And here really talking about the difference that historic tax credits make across this state. Not just in the big cities, but every small town. A chance to allow the local person to take that risk to go to the bank and decide to take an old building that was used in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, and in some communities maybe in the 1700s and 1800s, and instead of letting those areas die, breathe new life in these communities. Without the historic tax credit, Greenville today would still look like it did 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. We would still be an area that time had forgotten, with buildings boarded up, and we owe it directly to the small tax incentive that allows these investors to put their money at risk. And then when they put that money at risk, they create value which they benefit from, and the state benefits from, and this community benefits from. So I want to thank the Secretary for being here and her stance and going around the state and speaking on behalf of working with the legislature and bringing this credit back and continuing this revival. We don't want to lose this momentum. Continue this revival in our beautiful uptown areas across the state of North Carolina.
Right.
Madam Secretary.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor. Thank you for
so
having
much.
me, and thank you to everyone here who has been involved in this visit today. I am so excited to be here in Greenville and to see the incredible things I have seen. A former department store, a former church. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And to see the pictures of what they look like before somebody took the chance on them. And I will tell you, it takes a very special person, and I congratulate anyone that's willing to walk into something like this, in particularly if the neighborhood's blighted and there's so much need, and the person's willing to take the risk. Because these tax credits are not money handed to anyone. These tax credits are only taken after someone comes in, they have the vision, they take the risk, and they have to follow specific guidelines that our department in Cultural Resources, the State Historic Preservation Office, helps them through. They have to complete the project successfully. They have to file their taxes, and then they get a percentage of credit. Right. But it is wonderful that people would be willing to do this, and it's made North Carolina the state that it is.
Well, today we had a visit from Secretary of Cultural Resources, Susan Kluttz, and she's on a tour across the state to highlight what a valuable tool historic tax credits have been in economic development in our state. Really, you can go across the length of the state. I guess the saying is from Manteo to Murphy, and you can probably find a project where historic tax credits have been helpful in a renovation of a historic building that has led to jobs and increased tax base. In Greenville, we've had quite a few of these. We happen to be standing in front of the old Sycamore Hill Baptist Church, which sat empty for many, many years, and then the Taft family came in, used historic tax credits to renovate the building, and now it hosts Taft Office Equipment Company, which is a vibrant business here in our uptown commercial district. Sadly, the tax credit was allowed to expire back about 2 months ago, and the legislature did not take action to either reauthorize it or come up with a substitute. It is our hope, and we believe it's the hope of the governor of North Carolina, that we will see some sort of reauthorization or new program that will allow this great economic development tool to continue. Today we had an opportunity to start with the Secretary at the historic Jefferson Blunt Harvey building in our uptown commercial district, which is a wonderful retailing location. From there we drove by the recent renovations to about a half a block along East 5th Street, where now we have office buildings and retail in old abandoned buildings and some sort of rundown nightclubs that were there for a long time. We then drove by some properties along 10th Street that are owned by East Carolina University, where they hope to bring about some public-private partnerships to include historic adaptive reuse of warehouses with historic tax credits. And then finally we ended up at the Taft office building here in the Uptown District just off Dickinson Avenue, which is another example of great historic adaptive reuse work. Well, ultimately in communities across North Carolina, when you have old buildings that remain boarded up for a very long period of time, a combination of things happen. They continue to deteriorate, often to a point where they become a threat to public welfare and safety, and they have to be demolished. Or, unfortunately and sadly, and we've seen this in Greenville, you wind up seeing them burn down. and in either case, you no longer have that historic asset. On the other side, you can take these buildings and have mostly private investment and a small amount of public support that can now turn these buildings around, and they can be put back to productive use. It maintains the historic fabric of the community in the state of North Carolina, while also increasing the economy of the local community.